At 2 in the morning in Europe, I was fired via a cold email. Seconds later, my corporate card was declined at the hotel desk. I thought it was a mistake until I saw $18,400 frozen in my account for spending discipline. While I was stranded, my boss was already on LinkedIn, claiming my work as his own. He did not just want to fire me, he wanted to erase me before I could speak. My name is Ivy Harrison, and until exactly 3 minutes ago, I was the Director of Partnerships for SilverArc Solutions. Now, standing in the center of a dimly lit hotel room in Porto, Portugal, I was simply a woman holding a phone that had just delivered my execution. The vibration on the nightstand had been a single, short buzz. It was 2 in the morning. At this hour, a notification usually meant an emergency from the States, perhaps a server outage or a panicked client. I rolled over, the hotel sheets tangling around my legs, and squinted at the blue light. The subject line was not urgent. It was not update. It was 5 words, stark and capitalized. Termination of employment, effective immediately. I sat up. The blood rushed from my head so fast I felt dizzy. I tapped the notification. The email body was short, devoid of the usual corporate legal padding. It stated that due to a pending investigation regarding financial conduct, my access was revoked, and my contract was voided. No human resources representative was copied on the email. No attachment of a formal letter, just a digital guillotine drop. I reached for my laptop on the desk, flipping the lid open. My fingers flew across the keys to log into the company portal. Login failed. I tried Slack. The app bounced once and then displayed a gray screen. You have been signed out. I tried my email again. Password incorrect. In the span of 60 seconds, 5 years of building relationships, closing multi-million-dollar deals, and living out of suitcases had been wiped clean. I was digitally ghosted by the company I had just spent 2 weeks fighting for in Europe. Panic is a cold sensation. It starts in the stomach and grips the throat. I needed to move. I needed to do something tangible before the walls of the hotel room started closing in. I remembered the flight. My return flight to Chicago was scheduled for tomorrow afternoon, but the client meeting the reason I was here had pushed the schedule back. I needed to extend the hotel stay by 2 nights. I threw on a trench coat over my pajamas, shoved my feet into loafers, and grabbed my wallet. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The silence of a hotel at 2 in the morning is heavy. The lobby was empty except for a night manager, a young man named Joao, who looked startled to see a guest rushing the desk at this hour. "Ms. Harrison," he said, straightening his tie. "Is everything all right?" "I need to extend my reservation," I said, my voice sounding tight and foreign to my own ears. "2 more nights, and I need to confirm the incidentals are covered." "Of course," he said, typing calmly. "Let me just authorize the card on file for the additional nights and the current balance." He swiped the black SilverArc corporate Amex I had handed him. The machine beeped, a sharp, dissonant tone that echoed off the marble floors. Joao frowned. He wiped the strip on his blazer and swiped it again. Beep, declined. He looked up at me, his polite smile faltering. "I am sorry. Ms. Harrison, the card has been declined. It says, refer to issuer." "That is impossible," I said, though I knew deep down it was not. "Try it one more time. It is a corporate account. The limit is high." He tried again, the same rejection tone. "It is not working. Do you have another method of payment?" "The system is asking to settle the current balance of $4,200 immediately before we can extend." My stomach turned. They had not just fired me. They had cut the financial lifeline while I was 4,000 miles from home. "Use this one," I said, sliding my personal visa across the counter. My hand was shaking. I prayed the limit would hold. I had savings. But a $4,000 hit was significant. The machine whirred. "Approved. Thank you," Joao said, looking relieved to avoid a confrontation. "You are all set for 2 more nights." I took my receipt and walked away. Not toward the elevator, but to a seating area in the shadows of the lobby. I sat on a velvet armchair and pulled out my phone. I needed to see the damage. I opened the expense management app, the only tool that linked directly to my personal device and might still have cached data. It loaded slowly. When the dashboard appeared, I felt the air leave my lungs. There was a red banner across the top of my active report. Total amount frozen, $18,400. Beneath the number, in bright red letters, was the status label, Suspected Misuse Luxury Personal Travel. I stared at the screen. $18,400. My mind raced back to 3 weeks ago. We were preparing for the Porto trip. The logistics were a nightmare, last-minute venue changes, Premium transport for the client executives, the deposit for the signing ceremony hall. The company card had hit a temporary limit due to another team's overspending. I remembered the Slack message from Brent Kincaid clearly. It was seared into my memory. Ivy. Just put the venue and the transport on your personal card, or do a cash advance request. I will approve it immediately. We cannot lose this venue. Spend it. Company reimburses in 48 hours. Go. I had done exactly what he asked. I had fronted the deposits. I had booked the executive suites for the client. I had paid for the urgent translation services. That $18,400 was not a vacation. It was the cost of doing business to save his quarterly bonus. But now, staring at the app, I realized the trap. The description did not say client logistics. It said, luxury personal travel. And the Slack message from Brent, the one where he authorized it. It was gone. My access was gone. I had no screenshot. I had no paper trail. To the outside observer, it looked like I had taken a massive cash advance and blown it on a European holiday. I needed a witness. I scrolled through my contacts and found Lena Brooks. Lena was our travel coordinator back in Chicago. She was young, efficient, and usually worked late. If anyone could see the back end of the travel system, it was her. I pressed call. It rang 4 times. Hello? Her voice was small, confused. Lena. It is Ivy. Ivy. There was a pause, a hesitation that told me everything. Oh my God. Ivy. Are you okay, Lena? What is going on? My corporate card just got declined in the hotel lobby. I am locked out of everything. I do not know. Ivy. It is chaos here, she whispered. I could hear typing in the background. I just got an alert from the system 10 minutes ago. It was a manual override. Manual override by who I demanded. Finance, she said. But the request code. Wait, let me look. She went silent for a moment. The request came from Executive Review. Ivy, they revoked your payment authority. And, oh no, what your return ticket? Lena said, her voice dropping. It is showing as cancelled, not changed. Cancelled. Status is unauthorized traveler. I closed my eyes. They had stranded me. Lena, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. Who authorized the cancellation? It just says VP Sales Authorization, she said. Brent, listen to me. Lena, do not do anything that puts you at risk. But tell me one thing. Is there an HR ticket attached to any of this? No, she said. That is the weird part. Usually, if someone is terminated, I get a ticket from Sarah in HR to process the offboarding travel. I did not get anything. This came straight from the top down to the system admin. Thank you. Lena, I said, delete this call from your history. Ivy, how are you getting home? I will figure it out, I said. I hung up. I sat there in the silent lobby, the phone warm in my hand. I looked at the time again. 2:15 in the morning in Porto. I did the math. Portugal is 5 hours ahead of the East Coast, 6 hours ahead of Chicago. That meant it was 8:15 in the evening in Chicago. They waited. They could have fired me at 9 in the morning Chicago time. They could have fired me while banks were open, while flights were running, while I could have called HR. But they didn't. They waited until the business day ended in the US, ensuring no one in the office would answer my calls. And they waited until it was the dead of night in Europe, ensuring I would be exhausted, disoriented, and isolated. Brent Kincaid did not just want to fire me, he wanted to break me. He knew exactly how much money I had floated for this trip. He knew that by freezing the $18,400 and cutting off my corporate card, he was putting a financial gun to my head. I looked at the email again on my phone screen. Investigation pending. That was the key. As long as there was an investigation, they could hold the money. They could drag this out for months. And in the meantime, I was the rogue employee who tried to steal nearly $20,000. I stood up. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. Brent thought I was stranded. He thought I was panicking in a hotel room, crying over a declined credit card. He thought that by the time I managed to buy a ticket home with my own money, the narrative would already be set. He would have told the partners I was unstable. He would have told the team I was caught stealing. He was right about one thing. I was alone, but he was wrong about the rest. I wasn't going to cry. I walked toward the elevator, my heels clicking rhythmically on the stone floor. I had my personal laptop upstairs in my suitcase. I had my personal phone. And I had a memory that never failed me. If they wanted a war at 2 in the morning, they were going to get one, but they had made a critical error. They assumed I was just an employee. They forgot that for 5 years, I was the one who fixed their messes. I knew where the bodies were buried because I was the one who held the shovel. I pressed the button for the third floor. The doors slid shut, capturing my reflection in the polished metal. I looked tired. Yes, but I didn't look defeated. I looked like someone who was about to get to work. I sat in the velvet armchair of the hotel lobby, the silence of the European night pressing against the glass. To understand how I ended up stranded in Portugal with a frozen bank account and a shattered career, you have to understand the architecture of SilverArc Solutions. It was not just a company, it was a machine designed to convert human burnout into shareholder value. I am 34 years old, and for the last 5 years, I have been the Director of Partnerships at SilverArc. Our headquarters are in Raleigh, but I worked out of the Chicago office, a sprawling expanse of glass and brushed steel overlooking the river. It was the kind of office that looked beautiful on Instagram, but felt sterile in reality. The air always smelled of recycled oxygen and aggressive espresso. My job was to build bridges. While the sales team hunted for prey, I was the one who made sure the two companies could actually survive a marriage. I handled the integrations, the cultural alignments, and the long-term roadmaps. I was the one who made the promises true. This trip to Porto was supposed to be the crown jewel of my year. We were closing a deal with a massive European logistics conglomerate. This was not just another contract, it was a partnership that would integrate our software into their entire continental fleet. It was the kind of deal that pushes quarterly revenue into record-breaking territory. It was the kind of deal that gets people promoted to vice president. Or, in my case, the kind of deal that gets you erased. My boss was Brent Kincaid, the vice president of sales. If you work in corporate America, you know a Brent. He was 45, had perfect teeth, and wore suits that cost more than my first car. He spoke in a language of buzzwords that sounded meaningful until you tried to dissect them. He loved words like synergy, alignment, and bandwidth. Brent had a philosophy. He called it teamwork. But over the years, I learned that his definition of teamwork was specific. It meant I did the work, and he took the team's credit. We called it me work behind his back. But never to his face. He was too powerful, too charming, and too good at managing up. I should have seen this coming. The signs were there, scattered like breadcrumbs over the last 18 months. I remembered a Tuesday last November. I had spent 3 weeks building a strategic deck for a partnership with a healthcare provider. I had done the research, built the financial models, and designed the slides. The morning of the presentation, Brent stopped by my desk. "Ivy," he had said, flashing that bright, predatory smile. "Send me the raw file. I want to tweak the formatting just a bit, so it matches my keynote. We need to look cohesive." I sent it to him. When we walked into the boardroom an hour later, the title slide was up on the screen. It said Strategic Partnership Initiative, presented by Brent Kincaid. My name was nowhere on the cover. I was listed on the last slide, in small print, under Support Team. When I confronted him afterward, he laughed it off, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Ivy, do not get hung up on optics. The board knows who does the heavy lifting. I am just the face. You are the brain. We are a duo." I let it go. I let it go because I was paid well. I let it go because I believed that if I kept my head down and delivered, the system would reward me. I was naive. The setup for this Portugal trip was different. Though, it was aggressive. 2 weeks before the flight, we hit a snag with the travel budget. It was the end of the fiscal quarter, and the department funds were locked for audit. We needed to book flights, hotels, and secure the venue for the signing ceremony in Porto immediately. I went to Brent's office. He was putting golf balls into a cup on the floor. "Brent, the corporate card system is flagging the Porto expenses," I told him. "Finance says we need a manual override from the CFO, or we have to wait until next month. We cannot wait. The venue requires a deposit by Friday." He did not even look up from his putting. "Finance is a dinosaur, Ivy. We are not going to lose a $10 million deal because Marcus in accounting is slow with his rubber stamp." He stood up and leaned against his desk, crossing his arms. "Book it on your personal card, or use the cash advance feature on your card. I will approve the override manually. I have the authority." "Are you sure?" I asked. "That is $18,000. Brent, that is a lot of personal liability." "Ivy," he said, his voice dropping to that confidential, trust me tone. "If we land this, your bonus alone will be triple that amount. I will sign off on the reimbursement the second the contract ink is dry. Trust me, we need speed here. Agility is how we win." So I did it. I put the flights on my card. I withdrew the cash advance for the vendor deposits because the Portuguese venue demanded a wire transfer that the corporate system would not process in time. I extended myself financially because I believed we were on the same side. The irony is that the client, the European Logistics Group, did not care about Brent. They liked me. Their CEO, a stern man named Elias, had told us explicitly during the Zoom calls that he wanted me in Porto. Ms. Harrison understands our infrastructure, Elias had said. Mr. Kincaid, you are a fine salesman, but Ms. Harrison is an engineer of solutions. We want her at the table. That must have eaten Brent alive. To be sidelined on his own deal, to be the fine salesman, while his subordinate was the requested guest. I flew to Porto 3 days ahead of the signing to prep the ground. Brent stayed in Chicago, claiming he had board meetings, but promised to fly in for the final handshake. The last 48 hours had been a blur of work. I toured the facilities, finalized the contract language with their legal team, and set up the dinner event. I was exhausted but exhilarated. We were going to close this. Then came the text message. It was yesterday evening. I was in my hotel room, reviewing the final contract PDF one last time. My phone pinged. Brent. Great work on the ground. Ivy. I am hopping on the plane in 3 hours. Listen, Elias sent me a note. He wants to review the final technical specs one last time before the signing dinner. He is nervous. I typed back. I can email it to him directly. I have the files open. Brent replied instantly. No, do not clutter his inbox. Send the full package to me. The source files, the contract drafts, the vendor contacts, everything. I am going to compile it into a single executive summary and present it to him when I land. I need to look like I am fully up to speed. Ivy, help me out here. I need to align with our CEO before I land so I can get your bonus approved. I hesitated. My finger hovered over the send button. The protocol was clear. You do not share source files without a paper trail. You do not hand over the entire leverage of a deal before it is signed. But this was my boss. This was the man who had promised to reimburse the $18,000 I had just spent, if I refused. I looked like I was hoarding work. I looked like I wasn't a team player, and I wanted that bonus. I wanted this to be over. I convinced myself it was standard procedure. He was the VP. Of course he needed the files. Sending now, I typed. I zipped the folder. It contained everything, the contact list for every stakeholder, the negotiated terms, the technical implementation plan that only I knew how to execute, and the finalized contract ready for signature. I dragged the file into the email and hit send. I watched the progress bar fill up and disappear. Sent. I remembered feeling a sense of relief. I thought I had just completed the final handoff before the victory lap. I ordered room service and went to bed early, thinking about what I would do with the bonus money. Maybe a down payment on a new apartment. Maybe a real vacation where I did not have to check my email. I did not know that by hitting send, I had just signed my own death warrant. I did not know that while I was sleeping, Brent was not flying to Porto. He was in Chicago, sitting in his office, stripping my name off every document I had just sent him. He was rewriting the narrative. He was crafting the email to the CEO of SilverArc, claiming that I had gone rogue, that I was spending company money on luxury travel, and that he had to step in personally to save the deal from my incompetence. I handed him the weapon, and I went to sleep. Now, sitting in the dark lobby, I realized the brilliance of his timing. He waited until he had the files. He waited until the work was done. He waited until I was 4,000 miles away, separated by an ocean and 6 time zones. He did not just fire me, he stranded me. And he did it with the files I gave him. I looked down at my hands. They were steady now. The shock had passed. In its place was a cold, hard knot of realization. Brent Kincaid thought he was playing a game of chess. He thought he had removed the queen from the board, but he forgot one thing. I was the one who built the board. I knew where the cracks were, and I knew exactly how to bring the whole thing crashing down. The sun rose over Porto in a wash of pale, indifferent gold. It was a beautiful morning for tourists, for lovers, and for anyone whose life had not been systematically dismantled 6 hours prior. I had not slept. I sat at the small desk in my hotel room, my personal laptop open, a cold cup of espresso beside my hand. I had spent the dark hours of the morning waiting for the business day to begin in the United States. I needed to believe that this was a mistake, a glitch, a horrific automated error that a human being could fix. At 8 in the morning Chicago time, I drafted an email to the head of human resources, a woman named Sarah, whom I had known for 4 years. We had shared lunch. I had bought a gift for her baby shower. I typed a calm, rational message. Subject urgent access. Revoked and card declined. Please advise. I hit send. 1 second later, a notification pinged back. It was not a reply from Sarah. It was a system-automated response, the kind generated by a server that no longer recognizes you as a living entity within its digital borders. Delivery status. Notification failure. Address rejected. The sender is not authorized to email this recipient. Reason user Ivy Harrison is no longer an active employee. I stared at the screen. They had not just fired me, they had firewall blocked my personal email address from the corporate server. It was a digital restraining order. There would be no exit interview. There would be no discussion about Cobra insurance or severance packages. I was simply deleted. I picked up my phone. I needed to talk to Lena again. I switched to an encrypted messaging app, bypassing the standard SMS channels. I did not trust anything that could be subpoenaed easily, not anymore. Lena, I typed, I need you to tell me exactly what the system says about the money. Not just that it is frozen. I need to see the tags. 3 minutes passed. The 3 dots of her typing appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. She was scared. I could feel her hesitation across the ocean. Then, an image loaded. It was a screenshot of the internal finance dashboard, the one only the admin team could see. There was my name at the top. Below it, the line item for the $18,400. The status bar was flashing red, but it was the notes field that made my breath catch in my throat. Flagged by executive review. B. Kincaid. Reason suspected misuse. Luxury personal travel, unauthorized entertainment. I zoomed in on the image until the pixels blurred. Luxury personal travel. I looked around my hotel room. It was nice, yes, but it was a standard business suite. I pulled up my own mental ledger of that $18,400. $4,000 was for the urgent flight changes for the engineering team that Brent had insisted on flying out last minute, then canceled. I had paid the cancellation fees because the corporate card was maxed out. $2,000 was for the secure car service. We were visiting logistics hubs in industrial zones, places where you do not hail a cab at night. The client required security clearance for all vehicles entering the facility. Standard Uber was not an option, and the bulk of it, nearly $10,000, was the deposit for the Casa da Música. We had rented the VIP hall for the signing ceremony. It was not a party. It was a venue that Brent had specifically requested because he wanted, and I quote, optics that screamed dominance. He had labeled a business venue as unauthorized entertainment. He had labeled a secure transport as luxury travel. He was rewriting the reality of my expenses to fit a narrative of embezzlement. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Lena. Ivy. Look at the timestamp on the flag. He marked it as misuse yesterday afternoon. Before you even sent him the files. My blood ran cold. He had planned this. He had flagged the money to ensure I would be stranded, then waited for me to send the work, and then executed the termination. It was not a reaction to bad spending. It was a premeditated ambush. Thanks. Lena, I typed back. Go dark. Do not talk to me on company devices. I needed to see how far this went. If Brent was controlling the narrative internally with finance, what was he telling the world? I opened a new tab and went to LinkedIn. The algorithm served it to me immediately. It was the top post in my feed. Having already garnered hundreds of reactions, there was a photo. It was a picture of Brent, standing in the Chicago office, but behind him, projected on the massive screens of the boardroom, was the logo of our European partner. He was wearing his closing suit, a navy custom fit that cost more than my monthly rent. He was smiling, that tight, practiced smile of a man who has just conquered a nation. I read the caption, and I felt a physical pain in my chest, sharp and hot. Thrilled to announce that SilverArc Solutions is entering a new era. Today, I am proud to share that I have led and secured a landmark partnership with our European logistics allies. This deal represents months of strategic vision and relentless execution. Big things are coming in Q3. I scanned down. No mention of the 2 weeks I spent on the ground. No mention of the 6 months of negotiations I had led. And then, at the very bottom, he had added the insult. Special thanks to our CEO for the trust, and to the support staff who helped from afar. From afar. I was 4,000 miles away, in the dirt, doing the actual work, and he had reduced me to support staff from afar. He was erasing my physical presence in Porto. By saying I was afar, he was implying that he was the one close to the deal, even though he was sitting in an air-conditioned office in Illinois. I clicked on the comments. Great leadership. Brentway, wrote a VP from a competitor. Another win for the closers, wrote a sales director. Congratulations on driving this home, wrote our own CEO. I felt sick. It was a masterclass in corporate theft. He had not just stolen the money, he had stolen the timeline. Anyone looking at this post would assume the deal was done, signed, and delivered by Brent Kincaid. But the deal was not signed. That was the one card I still held. The physical signing ceremony was scheduled for tomorrow evening. As if summoned by my thought, an email notification slid onto my screen. It was not from SilverArk, it was from the external domain of the client. It was from Elias's executive assistant, a woman named Sophia with whom I had exchanged 50 emails over the last month. Dear Ms. Harrison, it began. The tone was different, formal, distant. We received a call this morning from Mr. Kincaid regarding the signing ceremony. We were informed that you are no longer authorized to represent SilverArk Solutions and that all further communication should be directed to him. I stared at the words. Brent had called them. He had called the client before I even woke up. The email continued. Given the sudden change in leadership at this critical stage, and the lack of clarity regarding the technical implementation lead, Elias is hesitant to proceed with the formal signature tomorrow. Should we pause the engagement until your internal team is aligned? I sat back in the chair. This was it. This was the moment where I could burn it all down. I could reply right now. I could tell Sophia everything. I could say, your deal is being handled by a fraudster who just stranded me in Europe and stole $18,000 from me. If I sent that email, the deal would die instantly. Elias was a conservative businessman. He hated drama. He would pull the contract. SilverArk's stock would take a hit, and Brent would lose his bonus. It would be instant. Scorched earth revenge. But it would also be suicide. If I torched the deal, SilverArk would sue me for tortious interference. They would claim I was a disgruntled ex-employee sabotaging the company on my way out. Brent would spin it as proof that I was unstable. See, I told you she was crazy. I would lose the $18,000 forever, and I would never work in this industry again. I took a deep breath. I had to think like a chess player, not a victim. Brent wanted me to react. He wanted me to scream. He wanted me to send a furious email to the client so he could point at it and say, look at how unprofessional she is. I was not going to give him that satisfaction. He had made a mistake, though a critical one, by claiming credit on LinkedIn before the ink was dry, and by spooking the client with a sudden change of personnel. He had created a gap. He needed this deal to close to cover up the fact that he had fired the only person who understood the technical details. He was bluffing. He was telling the world he had led and secured the partnership. But in reality, the client was one email away from walking out. I looked at the suspected misuse label on the screenshot again. He was framing me for financial misconduct to discredit my character so that when I inevitably complained, no one would believe me. It was a preemptive strike. He wasn't just hiding the debt. He was building a character assassination file. I needed to secure the evidence of what that money was actually for. I needed to prove that every cent of that $18,400 was spent on his orders for his glory. I closed the LinkedIn tab. I did not comment. I did not angry react. I left it alone. Let him bask in the premature applause. I turned back to the email from Sophia. I needed to buy time. I needed to keep the deal on life support without confirming Brent's lies, but also without triggering a lawsuit. I typed a reply. Dear Sophia, please hold the schedule as tentative. There are internal administrative updates occurring at SilverArk, but the priority remains the successful launch of our partnership. I will provide an update regarding the authorized signatory shortly. It was vague, it was professional, and it was a lie. I had no authority to provide an update, but it bought me 24 hours. I stood up and walked to the window. The city of Porto was fully awake now. The river glittered in the distance. Brent Kincaid had frozen my money. He had stolen my work. He had humiliated me publicly, but he had left a paper trail. He was arrogant, and arrogance makes people sloppy. He had marked $18,400 as luxury travel, when the receipts clearly showed conference halls and security transport. He had claimed credit for a deal that wasn't signed. He thought he had buried me, but he forgot that seeds also start in the dark. I grabbed my coat. I had work to do. I wasn't going to the airport. I was going to find every single receipt, every metadata log, and every witness I could find in this city. I was going to build a case so watertight that when I finally dropped it on his head, he wouldn't just be fired, he would be uninsurable. I opened the door and walked out into the hallway. The maid was just starting her rounds. She looked at me and smiled. Bom dia, she said. Room service. No thank you, I said, and for the first time in 12 hours, My voice was steady. I have everything I need. The room was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioner and the rhythmic tapping of my fingers against the keyboard. Panic is a fog. But anger, true and cold anger, is a clarifying agent. I was no longer the confused employee standing in a hotel lobby. I was an auditor of my own life, and I had exactly one goal. I needed to build a dossier that would survive a courtroom. I started with the physical evidence. I emptied my purse onto the bedspread. Receipts fluttered down like confetti. I smoothed them out, one by one, lining them up chronologically. Brent had labeled my spending as luxury personal travel. I looked at the paper trail in front of me. Exhibit A was a receipt for €350 from a 24-hour printing service in downtown Porto, dated 2 nights ago. That was for the bound presentation decks Brent had demanded for the client. Exhibit B was a charge for €1,200 for a secure car service. It wasn't a limousine. It was an armored transport required by the client's security protocol to visit their warehouse district. Exhibit C was the credit card authorization form for the Casa da Musica venue deposit, €9,000. I took photos of each receipt with my personal phone, ensuring the timestamps were visible. Then I uploaded them to a private cloud drive, creating a folder named Evidence. But receipts were defensive. They only proved I wasn't stealing. I needed something offensive. I needed something that proved Brent was lying. I opened my personal laptop. Thankfully, I had a habit that used to annoy our IT department. I used a personal cloud backup service that mirrored my desktop documents in real time. Because my access to the SilverArc server was cut, I couldn't see the live files, but I could see the last version that had synced before the lockout at 2 a.m. I scrolled through the Porto project folder. Most of the files were standard contracts and spreadsheets, but then I saw a file I did not recognize. It was a PDF labeled Travel Budget Authorization Final PIF. I frowned. I had never named a file that. I double-clicked it. The document opened. It was a budget approval form for the $18,400, listing the expenses as discretionary executive entertainment, and there, at the bottom of the page, was my signature. I stared at the screen. It was my signature. Certainly, it had the distinctive loop on the Y that I always made, but I had never signed this document. I had never authorized these expenses as entertainment. I zoomed in to 400%. The pixels around the signature were jagged. It was a copy-paste job. A clumsy one. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. This was forgery. But proving a digital forgery is hard, unless you have the metadata. I right-clicked on the file and selected Get Info. The Properties window popped up. My eyes scanned down to the Origin section. Created today, 1:17 in the morning. Modified today, 1:20 in the morning. Author Beaconcade Admin. Device MacBook Pro, 16-inch. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Brent had created this document 43 minutes before he fired me. He had taken my signature from another file, pasted it onto this fraudulent budget approval, and saved it to the shared drive, which then synced to my computer moments before he cut my access. He planted it. He wanted it to look like I had signed off on executive entertainment, so that when he flagged it as misuse, he could point to this document and say, "See, she knew what she was doing." He was trying to frame me for embezzlement. I took a screenshot of the metadata. I took a photo of the screen with my phone. I recorded a video of myself opening the file and clicking the properties, just in case he tried to scrub the server logs later. "Got you," I whispered, but I needed more. I needed to prove the coordination. I put on my shoes and went back down to the lobby. The night manager, Joao, was still there. He looked up, surprised to see me again. "Ms. Harrison," he said, "is there a problem with the room?" "No, Joao," I said, leaning on the marble counter. "I need a favor. I need a printout of my guest folio, but I need it to show the specific transaction attempts, not just the approved ones. I need the log of the decline." He hesitated. "Usually we just provide the final invoice." "Please," I said, keeping my voice low. "It is for my expense report. I need to show the exact time the corporate card was rejected." He nodded slowly and typed into his terminal. The printer whirred. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. I looked at the line item. Transaction declined American Express ending in 1009, time 2:06 in the morning. Reason issuer request. Stolen or lost status. I folded the paper carefully and placed it in my pocket. The timeline was now undeniable. 1:17 in the morning, Brent creates the forged approval document. 2:00 in the morning, the termination email is sent. 2:06 in the morning, the credit card is killed. It was a synchronized execution. I went back to my room. My phone buzzed. It was Lena again. She was risking her job by talking to me. But Lena was the kind of person who valued fairness over policy. Ivy, the message read, I found something in the archive. Do not tell anyone I sent this. It was a forwarded email chain. The subject line was, Advance Protocol. The email was dated 3 days ago. It was from Brent Kincaid to the CFO, Marcus Hale. I read the text, and the blood drained from my face. Marcus, Brent had written, regarding the Porto advance for Ivy, let us approve the $18,400 for now to get the vendor moving, but keep a flag on it. Once the deal is secured and the contract is signed, I want to review the categorization. If there are any hiccups, freeze her advance until the deal is secured. We need to keep everyone hungry. Hungry? He didn't just fire me because he wanted the credit. He was using the money as a leash. He knew that if he froze $18,000 of my personal liability, I would be too terrified, too broke, and too desperate to fight back. He thought I would prioritize getting my money back over exposing the truth. He thought I would come crawling to him, begging for the reimbursement, and in exchange, I would sign whatever NDA he put in front of me. He was using my financial ruin as an insurance policy for his reputation. I sat there for a long time, staring at the glowing screen. The sun was fully up now. The city outside was bustling with life. People going to work, trams rattling down the street. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. It was the calm of a person who realizes they have nothing left to lose. Brent thought he was playing chess. He thought he had taken my queen, but he didn't realize that by forging that document and leaving that timestamp, he had exposed his own king. I opened my personal email client. I composed a new message. I did not address it to Brent. I did not address it to HR. I typed 2 email addresses in the to field, Robert Sterling, the CEO of SilverArc Solutions, Amanda Vance, the General Counsel. I took a deep breath. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was the point of no return. Once I sent this, I was declaring open war on a company worth $500 million. Subject urgent. Evidence of fraud, forgery, and wrongful termination, Ivy Harrison. I began to type. Dear Mr. Sterling and Ms. Vance, my name is Ivy Harrison. Until 6 hours ago, I was your Director of Partnerships. I'm currently stranded in Porto, Portugal. At 2 o'clock in the morning local time, I received a termination notice. 6 minutes later, my corporate access was revoked and $18,400 of business expenses funds. I was instructed to advance personally by Vice President Brent Kincaid were frozen under a false claim of luxury misconduct. I am writing to you not to beg for my job, but to inform you of a significant liability issue regarding your Vice President of Sales. Attached to this email, you will find 3 things. 1. A metadata report showing that a document titled Travel Budget Authorization bearing my electronic signature was created on Mr. Kincaid's device at 1:17 this morning, 40 minutes before my termination. I did not sign this document. It is a forgery. 2. A hotel folio confirming that my corporate payment method was manually revoked at 2:06 this morning, leaving me stranded abroad. 3. Receipts and time-stamped photos proving that the $18,400 in question was spent on client-mandated security and venue deposits, directly contradicting the luxury personal travel classification entered into your system. Mr. Kincaid has publicly claimed credit for the European partnership on LinkedIn. However, please be aware that the contract is not signed. I am the sole point of contact for the client's technical team. I am prepared to hand over full documentation to an external auditor. I await your immediate response regarding the unfreezing of my funds and a preservation order for all internal communications regarding my employment. I read it over once. It was cold. It was factual. It was dangerous. I attached the files. The screenshot of the metadata, the photo of the hotel log, the receipts. I hit send. I watched the message sent notification appear. I closed my laptop. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had just thrown a grenade into the C-suite. Now, I just had to wait for the explosion. The reply from SilverArc's General Counsel, Amanda Vance, arrived 45 minutes after I sent my evidence package. I expected panic. I expected a phone call. I expected a flurry of questions asking how a vice president could possibly forge a signature. Instead, I got 2 sentences. Ms. Harrison, we are in receipt of your correspondence and the attached files. We will review the matter internally and respond in due course. That was it. No, we are shocked. No, We will unfreeze your funds immediately. Just the cold, robotic shield of corporate liability. They were circling the wagons. By acknowledging receipt but doing nothing, they were buying time to figure out if they could bury me or if they had to bury Brent. I stared at the screen, the white light burning into my tired eyes. In due course is lawyer speak for until you give up or run out of money. I closed the laptop and rubbed my temples. The silence in the hotel room was deafening. I was waiting for the next blow, and I did not have to wait long. My personal phone rang. The caller ID displayed a number I knew well. It was Sasha Vale, a senior HR business partner. Sasha was someone I had grabbed drinks with, someone who had complained to me about her dating life. I thought, for a fleeting second, that this was a friend reaching out. I answered. "Sasha, Ivy," she said. Her voice was not the warm, gossipy tone I was used to. It was smooth, polished, and terrifyingly calm. It was the voice she used when she was firing people. "I am glad you picked up. We have been trying to reach you." "I have been right here," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Stranded in Porto, because the company cut my card." "Listen, Ivy," she said, and I could hear the slight echo of a headset. She wasn't calling from her cell. She was calling from the recorded line in the office. "I saw the email you sent to Amanda. Look, I know emotions are high right now, but you need to understand how this looks from our side." "How it looks?" I asked. "Sasha, Brent forged my signature. I sent you the metadata." "Brent explained the situation to us," she said, cutting me off smoothly. "He said there was a misunderstanding regarding the verbal authorization for the entertainment expenses. He mentioned that you were under a lot of stress with the deal and that perhaps judgment was lapsed." My grip on the phone tightened. Judgment lapsed. "I spent that money on armored cars and a venue deposit. The policy is clear about luxury bookings without prior written approval." "Ivy," she said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy, "Brent is very concerned about the reputational damage this is causing. He told us he tried to protect you, but when the audit flagged the amount, his hands were tied. I felt the blood roaring in my ears. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. Brent had not only stolen the money, he had spun a story where he was the benevolent boss, forced to discipline a rogue employee." "Sasha," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, "are you recording this?" There was a pause, a beat too long. "All HR communications are documented for quality assurance," she recited. "Good," I said. "Then document this. I did not violate policy. I followed instructions. And if you are helping him cover up a forgery, you are not protecting the company. You are an accessory." "Ivy, do not make this bigger than it is," she snapped, the mask slipping for a fraction of a second. "If you sign the separation agreement we are preparing, we can discuss a payment plan for the card balance. We can make this go away. You do not want a termination for cause on your record. It kills careers." "I am not signing anything," I said. "And Sasha, tell Brent I said hello." I hung up. My hand was shaking. They were not investigating him. They were building a case against me. They wanted me to be the hysterical woman who couldn't handle the pressure and blew $20,000 on a European joyride. I threw the phone onto the bed. It bounced and landed screen up. A text message notification slid across the glass. It was from Jason, a junior account manager on my team. He was young, loyal, and usually kept his head down. "Ivy," the text read, "is it true Brent just called a team huddle? He said you walked off the job in the middle of the negotiations. He said you had a breakdown and flew home. He is telling everyone he has to clean up the mess." I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. A breakdown. Of course, it was the oldest play in the book. If a woman speaks up, she is difficult. If she fights back, she is crazy. If she exposes fraud, she is having a breakdown. "I did not quit, Jason," I typed back. "And I am still in Porto. Do not believe the hype." "He is pretty convincing," Jason replied. "He is walking around the sales floor shaking his head, acting like a disappointed father. People are buying it. Ivy, you need to come back." I couldn't go back. Not yet. Not without the kill shot. I needed to know what was happening on the front lines. The deal. That was the only thing that mattered to the board. If the deal was safe, I was expendable. If the deal was in danger, they would listen. I checked my email again. There was a new message from Sophia, the client's assistant. "Dear Ms. Harrison," it read, "following up on my previous note, Mr. Kincaid has just sent a revised proposal to Elias directly." I opened the attachment she had included. It was a one-page term sheet. My eyes scanned the numbers. I gasped. Brent had offered them a 3% discount on the annual recurring revenue if they signed with him. Digitally, within the next 24 hours. 3%. On a deal this size, that was hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue wiped off the table. He was burning company margin to buy speed. He knew that if the client signed today, he could claim the victory, collect his bonus, and bury me under the success. He was selling SilverArc's future profitability to pay for his own survival. That was the mistake. Retaliation is hard to prove. Forgery is technical, but selling out the company, that was something the board of directors would understand. I needed a weapon, a real one. I was done playing HR games. I opened my browser and searched for a name I had bookmarked years ago, back when a friend of mine was fired for getting pregnant. Megan Price. Employment litigation, Raleigh, North Carolina. Her website was stark, black and white. The header read, "We defend the workforce, not the corporation." I dialed the number. It was late in North Carolina, almost 5 in the afternoon. "Price Law," a voice answered, sharp, professional. "I need to speak to Megan Price," I said. "My name is Ivy Harrison. I am a director at SilverArc Solutions. I have been terminated in the middle of an overseas deal. My funds are frozen, and I have evidence of executive fraud." There was a click, a hold music tone that lasted exactly 4 seconds, and then a new voice came on the line. It sounded like gravel and expensive whiskey. "Start from the beginning," Megan Price said, "and do not leave out the numbers." I told her everything, the text messages, the forged PDF, the timeline of the firing, the call from Sasha, the discount Brent just offered the client. When I finished, there was silence on the line. "Okay," Megan said. I could hear the scratch of a pen on paper. "Here is the situation. This is not just wrongful termination. This is retaliation under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, because you questioned the accounting controls. It is wage theft regarding the frozen reimbursement, and the forgery, that is criminal fraud." "They are trying to make me sign a separation agreement," I said. "Of course they are," Megan scoffed. "They are terrified. Listen to me. Ivy, you are not an employee anymore. You are a liability, and right now, you are an unsecured liability. We need to make you a terrifying one." "How?" "I am going to draft a litigation hold letter," she said. "It tells them that if they delete one email, one Slack message, or one server log, they are committing a federal crime. I will have it in Amanda Vance's inbox within the hour. But you need to do something for me." "Anything," I said. "Do not engage with HR. Do not talk to Brent. And regarding the client," she paused. "You cannot interfere with the contract, or they will countersue you for damages. But you can be transparent. Transparent how? Send a neutral email. Tell them you have retained counsel. Do not accuse Brent of anything. Just state the facts of your representation. It will spook them enough to pause the signing without you actually sabotaging the deal." I thanked her and hung up. I felt a shift in my chest. The panic that had been vibrating in my bones for the last 12 hours began to settle into something colder, harder. I was not alone anymore. I had a shark in my corner. I opened the draft to Sophia. I deleted my previous vague excuses. I typed words that were precise and dangerous. "Dear Sophia, please be advised that due to a dispute regarding my employment status and authority, I have retained legal counsel to manage my exit from SilverArc Solutions. While I cannot comment on the revised proposal sent by Mr. Kincaid, please ensure that any historical documents regarding technical implementation are verified, as my access to validate them has been removed. I will provide contact information for my attorney, Ms. Megan Price, should your legal team require clarity on the continuity of our previous agreements." I hit send. It was a beautiful move. I didn't say Brent was lying. I simply said I couldn't verify the documents because I was locked out. I planted the seed of doubt. No general counsel in Europe would let their CEO sign a multi-million-dollar contract when the lead director had just lawyered up and warned them about verification. I stood up and walked to the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red. My hair was messy. And I was wearing the same clothes for 24 hours. But the fear was gone. When they want to make you crazy, they isolate you. They cut your money. They spread rumors. They try to make you doubt your own memory. But they forgot that I dealt with facts. I dealt with contracts. I dealt with reality. Brent Kincaid had offered a 3% discount. He had put a price tag on his integrity. I walked back to the desk and opened the folder where I kept the evidence. I created a new subfolder titled Phase 2. The sun was setting over Porto now, casting long shadows across the room. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to wait for Megan's letter to hit their inbox. I imagined the notification pinging on Amanda Vance's computer. I imagined the color draining from her face. They wanted to erase me. Fine. I was going to make sure that when this was over, my name was the only thing they would remember. The flight home was the most expensive one-way ticket I had ever purchased. $1,800 for a last-minute economy seat with 2 layovers. My personal Visa card was already groaning under the weight of the hotel extension, so I had to make a call I never thought I would have to make at 34 years old. I called my younger brother, Sam, and asked him to Venmo me $500 so I could afford the Uber from O'Hare Airport to my apartment. I sat in the middle seat of row 42, wedged between a backpacker and a man who fell asleep before takeoff. I did not sleep. I spent 9 hours staring at the seatback in front of me, clutching a plastic envelope where I had shoved every single receipt from the last 24 hours. The taxi to the airport, the overpriced sandwich at the terminal, the checked bag fee. Every time I swiped my card, I felt a flash of rage, but I also felt a grim satisfaction. In the corporate world, these are known as damages. By forcing me to repatriate myself at my own expense after an abrupt termination, SilverArc was racking up a bill that I intended to collect with interest. I landed in Chicago on a Tuesday afternoon. The city was gray and raining, matching the mood of my empty apartment. I didn't unpack. I didn't shower. I sat down at my kitchen island and opened my laptop. It was time to unleash Megan Price. Megan did not believe in polite warning shots. She believed in nuclear deterrence. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, while SilverArc's executive team was likely congratulating themselves on their ruthlessness, Megan served the general counsel, Amanda Vance, with a formal litigation hold notice. I had never seen one before, but reading the copy Megan BCC'd me on gave me a shiver of vindication. Dear Ms. Vance, the letter began. This firm represents Ivy Harrison regarding her wrongful termination and the unlawful retention of wages. You are hereby placed on notice to preserve all records, including but not limited to emails, Slack messages, metadata logs, expense reports, and voicemails that relate to Ms. Harrison's employment and the European Partnership deal. Failure to preserve these documents will be treated as spoliation of evidence. Spoliation. It was a terrifying word for a legal department. It meant that if Brent Kincaid tried to delete one more file, or if IT tried to scrub the server logs to hide his forgery, the court would automatically assume the missing evidence proved his guilt. We had just frozen the crime scene. 2 hours later, Megan fired the second barrel. The demand letter. This wasn't a request. It was an invoice for justice. We demanded the immediate release of the $18,400 currently frozen in my account. We demanded the payout of my accrued vacation time, which was required by Illinois state law, and we demanded a written explanation for the termination, specifically citing the investigation they claimed was pending. Your client, Megan wrote, has characterized authorized business expenses as luxury personal travel without providing a single audit report or allowing the employee to rebut the claim. This constitutes wage theft and defamation. I felt a weight lift off my chest as I read it. For the last 48 hours, I had been on the defensive. Now, we were attacking their process, but I knew corporate legal teams. They move slow. They hide behind internal reviews. I needed to open a second front, one that they couldn't ignore. I went to the website of the Illinois Department of Labor. I navigated to the Wage Payment and Collection Act complaint form. I filled it out meticulously. I listed the $18,400 not as an expense report, but as an unlawful deduction from wages. There is a specific nuance here that Brent had missed. When he told me to take a cash advance and use my personal card, he blurred the line between company money and personal liability. By freezing the reimbursement, he was essentially garnishing my wages to pay for his business operation. The Department of Labor hates that. They do not care about corporate policy or luxury travel. They care about whether an employee is being forced to pay for their employer's cost of doing business. I hit submit. The reference number appeared on the screen. I took a screenshot and emailed it to Megan. Good, she replied instantly. Now we wait for them to blink. Wednesday morning brought silence from the company, but noise from the underground. My phone buzzed with a message from Lena. She was terrified. I could tell by the way she typed short bursts, typos she usually would never make. Ivy, finance is freaking out. CFO was just on the floor yelling at the controller. What happened? I asked. I cannot talk long. But I saw an email on the shared screen during the morning huddle. Marcus Hale replied to Brent's request to keep your money frozen. What did it say? Lena? A minute passed. Then, a photo of a computer screen appeared. It was blurry, taken hastily under a desk, but the text was legible. From Marcus Hale, CFO, to Brent Kincaid, VP Sales, subject RE. Harrison Advance freeze. Brent, legal just got a litigation hold letter. I am looking at the misuse flag you put on the $18,000. Where is the audit report? You cannot flag a director for fraud without a compliance review. If this money was for the Porto venue, why is it tagged as personal luxury? We need to unfreeze this and audit it properly, or we are looking at a state labor violation. Fix this. I stared at the image. Fix this. Marcus Hale didn't know about the forgery. He didn't know about the plot. He just saw a compliance nightmare. He was a numbers guy, and the numbers weren't adding up. He was asking the question that Brent couldn't answer. Why was the money flagged before an audit was even done? Brent was cornered. He couldn't fix it, because fixing it meant admitting the money was legitimate. If the money was legitimate, then firing me was wrongful. And if firing me was wrongful, his entire takeover of the European deal was based on a lie. He had overplayed his hand. He thought he could use the finance department as his personal weapon, but he forgot that CFOs answer to the law, not to the VP of sales. I waited. I knew Brent. I knew how he operated when he was backed into a corner. He wouldn't apologize. He wouldn't confess to legal. He would try to cut a deal. He would try to make the problem disappear quietly. At 1:30 in the afternoon, my personal email pinged. It was not from his Silver Arc corporate address. It was from his personal Gmail account, the one he used for golf trips and fantasy football. Subject: let's talk. I didn't open it immediately. I forwarded it to Megan first. Then I opened it. Ivy, it read. No greeting, no formalities. I think things have gotten out of hand. The legal route is going to take months and cost you a fortune in fees. Neither of us wants that. I am willing to go to Marcus and authorize the release of the $18,400 immediately. I can probably get them to classify it as a severance payout, so it is tax advantageous for you, but I need this noise to stop. The client is getting nervous about the litigation hold rumors. If you withdraw the demand letter and the labor board complaint, I will make sure the money is in your account by Friday. We can sign a mutual non-disparagement agreement and move on. Let me know. This offer expires at midnight. I read it twice. Then I laughed, a loud, sharp sound that startled me in the quiet apartment. He was terrified. I will consider paying you, was what he wrote. But what he meant was, please stop investigating me. He was trying to buy my silence with my own money. He was offering to return the $18,000 he had stolen from me, pretending it was a generous gift, in exchange for me dropping the case that would expose his forgery. And the part about tax advantageous severance, that was illegal. You cannot classify expense reimbursement as severance. That is tax fraud. He was suggesting we conspire to defraud the IRS just to cover his tracks. He had just handed me the final nail for his coffin. This wasn't just a settlement offer, it was a confession. An innocent man does not offer to pay off a fraudulent employee from his personal email address to avoid a legal investigation. An innocent man follows the process. I picked up my phone and called Megan. Did you see it? I asked. I printed it, Megan said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. He just solicited you to obstruct an internal investigation and propose tax fraud. Ivy, this is beautiful. He is not just liable civilly anymore. He is dangerously close to criminal territory. What do we do? I asked. Do I reply? Absolutely not, Megan said. You do not negotiate with terrorists, and you do not negotiate with frantic executives who are digging their own graves. We are going to take this email, and we are going to attach it to a supplemental filing for the board of directors. We are going to show them that their VP of sales is trying to bribe a witness. He said the offer expires at midnight, I said. Let it expire, Megan said. He is trying to rush you because the quarterly board meeting is on Friday. He needs you gone before the directors ask questions. We are not going to be gone, Ivy. We are going to be the only thing they talk about. I hung up. I looked at the email again. Let's talk, he had written. I remembered the times he had stolen my presentation decks. I remembered the times he had talked over me in meetings. I remembered the way he had looked at me when he told me to put the $18,000 on my card, promising he had my back. He had used my trust as a weapon. Now, He wanted to use my financial desperation as a bargaining chip. He didn't know that I had already borrowed money from my brother. He didn't know that I was eating instant oatmeal for dinner. He didn't know that I didn't care about the money anymore. I cared about the truth. I moved the email into the folder marked Evidence. I didn't reply. I let the clock tick past midnight. I sat in the dark of my living room, watching the city lights of Chicago. Somewhere in the suburbs, Brent Kincaid was probably checking his phone every 5 minutes, sweating, wondering why I hadn't taken the bait. He was about to find out that I wasn't fishing for a settlement. I was hunting for his career. Thursday morning arrived with the heavy, humid heat of a Chicago summer. But inside my apartment, the air was freezing. I had turned the air conditioning down to 65 degrees. I needed to be awake. I needed to be sharp. I had spent the last 2 days existing in a state of suspended animation, surviving on coffee and adrenaline. My phone was a lifeline, buzzing intermittently with updates from the few allies I had left inside Silver Arc. The most critical piece of intelligence came from Jason at 9 o'clock in the morning. "Quarterly all hands is confirmed for tomorrow at 10, he texted. "The agenda just went out. Brent is the keynote. He is presenting the European deal as the model of the future. He is going to be live-streamed to the entire global staff and the board of directors." I stared at the phone. This was it. This was why he had tried to bribe me with the settlement offer. He needed me quiet before he stood on that stage. He needed the narrative to be clean. He was going to stand up in front of the people who controlled his stock options and tell a story about how he saved the company from a chaotic quarter, glossing over the fact that the chaos was entirely manufactured by him. I called Megan immediately. "He is presenting tomorrow," I said. "He is going to lie to the entire board." "Good," Megan said. Her voice was calm, a sharp contrast to my racing heart. "Let him. The higher he climbs, the harder the fall." "I want to stop him," I said. "I want to send the evidence to the general staff listserv. I want everyone to know what he did before he opens his mouth." "No," Megan commanded. "Absolutely not. If you blast the company, you look like a disgruntled ex-employee trying to burn the house down. You look emotional. You look unstable. That plays right into his mental breakdown narrative." She paused, and I could hear the click of her lighter. "Ivy, we do not want a public spectacle. We want a corporate execution. We need to put the truth in the hands of the people who are legally liable if they ignore it. We are going to target the audit committee and the chairman of the board. We are going to give them the package tonight. Let them read it with their morning coffee. Let them sit in that meeting tomorrow, watching Brent smile, while they hold the proof of his fraud in their hands." She was right. It was diabolical. It was the difference between a scream and a whisper. A scream can be ignored. A whisper about fraud, heard by the right ears, is deafening. I spent the next 4 hours assembling the timeline package. It had to be perfect. No emotion, no adjectives, just cold, hard data. I started with the metadata of the forged signature. I created a clean PDF that showed the side-by-side comparison my real signature versus the pixelated copy-paste job on the entertainment approval. Then, I added the email form from the finance department, the one where Brent instructed Marcus Hale to freeze her advance. I added the hotel folio showing the exact minute the card was declined. It was a strong case, but I felt like I was missing something. I had proof of the fraud and the financial abuse, but I needed proof of the malice. I needed to prove that this wasn't just a bad decision made in the heat of the moment. I needed to prove he planned it. My phone rang. It was Lena. "Ivy," she whispered. She was in the bathroom again. The echo was distinct. "I found something else. I was looking at the vendor logs for the travel agency. You know we use executive journeys for the high-level bookings." "Yes," I said. "They handled the flight changes." "I was trying to find out why your return ticket was canceled so fast," Lena said. "So I called their support line and pretended to be looking for an invoice. The agent told me something weird. She said the request to change the trip owner from you to Brent came in 3 days ago." I stopped typing. 3 days ago, I was still in meetings with the client." "Exactly," Lena said. "But here's the kicker. The notes in their system say the request was made because the employee that is you was scheduled for termination, Ivy. The request was logged 24 hours before he even asked you for the files. He told the travel agent you were being fired a full day before he fired you." I felt a chill run down my spine. This was the smoking gun. He hadn't fired me because of the luxury spending. He had planned to fire me days in advance. The luxury spending flag was just the excuse he invented later to justify it. "Lena," I said, "I need that log." "I cannot get it," she said, her voice trembling. "It is external. It is on their system. Not ours. Okay, I said. Thank you. Lena. Hang up. You have done enough. I disconnected and immediately dialed the number for Executive Journeys. I didn't call the general support line. I called the account manager, a woman named Karen, whom I had sent Christmas baskets to for 3 years. Executive Journeys, this is Karen. Karen, this is Ivy Harrison. Ivy. She sounded cheerful, oblivious. I heard there was some drama over there. Are you okay? Karen, I am going to be direct, I said. I am currently compiling a legal discovery package regarding fraudulent activities at SilverArc. I have reason to believe your agency was given false information regarding my employment status to authorize unauthorized ticket cancellations. The cheerfulness evaporated. Ivy, I cannot discuss another client's internal. I am not asking you to discuss it, I cut in. I am telling you that my attorney, Megan Price, is preparing a subpoena for your communication logs. If I have to drag this out of you in court, I will name Executive Journeys as a co-conspirator in a wage theft lawsuit. But if you send me the email thread where Brent Kincaid requested the ownership change of my itinerary, I will consider your agency a neutral witness. Silence. I could hear her breathing. In the corporate world, nobody wants to be a co-conspirator. Nobody wants to be the collateral damage in a VP's war. I can send you a transcript of the request for your records, Karen said tightly. Strictly for your personal verification. That is all I need, I said. 5 minutes later, it arrived. It was a chat transcript between Brent and the agency, timestamp Tuesday, 8:30 in the morning, user Brent Kincaid. Hi, I need to take over full admin rights for the Porto itinerary. Remove Harrison. She is being let go tomorrow. I need to control the return flights to ensure compliance. She is being let go tomorrow. He wrote that before I had spent the $18,000 on the venue deposit. He wrote that before I sent him the files. He wrote that while he was texting me, good job, and keep pushing, I added the transcript to the package. It was the final piece of the puzzle. It proved premeditation. It proved the spending investigation was a lie constructed after the fact. I had one last stop. I opened my email to Joao at the hotel in Porto. Dear Joao, I typed, I require a formal statement on hotel letterhead, confirming that the decline of the SilverArc American Express was due to an issuer revocation and not a credit limit issue. Please sign and date it. Joao, bless his heart, replied within the hour. The document was stiff and formal, perfect for a boardroom. We confirmed that the transaction was declined due to a specific instruction from the card issuer to suspend authorization for this specific guest. I had it all. I looked at the folder on my desktop. I named it Confidential Board Review Harrison. It contained 5 files. 1. The Executive Journeys transcript proving premeditation. 2. The metadata report proving the signature forgery. 3. The hotel statement proving the targeted financial freeze. 4. The email from finance showing Brent's refusal to audit. 5. A summary timeline that connected every dot, showing how Brent Kincaid manufactured a crisis to steal a deal and defraud an employee. I didn't write a long, emotional cover letter. I didn't use bold fonts or exclamation points. I drafted a simple email to Robert Sterling, CEO, Audit Committee SilverArc. Subject material notice. Executive fraud and internal control failures regarding European partnership. Dear members of the Board and Audit Committee, attached is documentation regarding significant irregularities in the financial reporting and operational conduct of the Q3 European Partnership deal. The evidence demonstrates that Vice President Brent Kincaid forged a director's signature on financial documents, Exhibit A, falsified vendor records to conceal the timeline of termination, Exhibit B, misrepresented company liabilities to the Finance Department, Exhibit C. These actions have created material legal exposure for SilverArc Solutions. This documentation has been preserved by legal counsel. I looked at the clock. It was 9 in the evening. The board members would be checking their emails one last time before the big meeting tomorrow. They would be expecting updated revenue projections. Instead, they were going to get a murder weapon. I hovered my mouse over the send button. I thought about Brent. I thought about the way he probably practiced his speech in the mirror tonight, adjusting his tie, thinking he was untouchable. He thought I was just a girl who booked the flights. He thought I was afar. He didn't know that I was right here, inside his inbox. I clicked send. The email whooshed away. I didn't feel a rush of joy. I felt a cold, clinical satisfaction. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to post on LinkedIn. I had just poured truth into the system like ice water into a hot engine. Now, all I had to do was wait for the block to crack. Tomorrow morning, Brent would walk onto that stage to present his victory, but the people sitting in the front row would know exactly what he was. The trap was set. The heist was complete. I closed my laptop and finally, for the first time in 4 days, I turned off the light and went to sleep. The morning of the all-hands meeting arrived with a silence that felt heavy enough to break bones. I sat at my kitchen table, my laptop open, watching the clock tick toward 9 in the morning. I knew the schedule. At 10 o'clock, the live stream would start. At 10:15, Brent Kincaid was scheduled to take the stage. My phone rang at 8:03. The caller ID did not say SilverArc HR or unknown. It said Marcus Hale. The chief financial officer never called employees directly. He had people for that. If Marcus Hale was dialing my number personally, it meant the email I sent last night had not just landed, it had detonated. I answered on the second ring. "This is Ivy." "Ms. Harrison," Marcus said. His voice was dry, lacking the usual polish of an executive. It sounded like the voice of a man who had been up all night staring at spreadsheets that did not balance. "I am looking at a document titled Travel Budget Authorization Final. It is dated Tuesday morning. It authorizes $18,400 for executive entertainment." He paused. I could hear the hum of a server room in the background. "Did you sign this document?" he asked. "No," I said. The word hung in the air. Simple and absolute. I did not create it. I did not sign it. And I certainly did not authorize entertainment expenses while I was scrambling to book armored transport for a client site visit. "The signature looks like yours," Marcus said, but it wasn't an accusation. It was a probe. "The signature is a low-resolution image file pasted onto a PDF," I replied. "If you check the metadata I sent you, Marcus, you will see the file was created on a MacBook Pro registered to Brent Kincaid. I use a Dell XPS, and I was in Portugal. The file was created in the Central Time Zone." There was a long silence on the line. Then, the sound of typing. Fast, aggressive typing. "I had it pull the creation logs this morning at 6, Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. The electronic signature stamp originated from an IP address inside the Chicago office, specifically, the hardline connection in the VP Sales Corner office. I closed my eyes and exhaled. There it was. The technical truth that no amount of charisma could talk away. Brent had signed my name from his desk while I was asleep in another continent. "That is fraud, Marcus," I said. "And since it involves interstate wire transfers for the vendor payments, it is federal." "I am aware of the implications," Marcus snapped. "I am pulling the file from the audit queue. Do not speak to anyone until I call you back." The line went dead. The first domino had fallen. 10 minutes later, my email inbox, which had been dormant since the termination, pinged with a notification. It was a message to the senior leadership team, but because I had CC'd myself on the legal hold demand, the system had erroneously, or perhaps maliciously, thanks to a sympathetic IT admin kept me on the thread. It was from Brent. The subject line was, "Urgent personnel context for board." "Team," the email read, "I am hearing rumors of some noise regarding the former director of partnerships. I want to get ahead of this. Ivy has been under immense strain lately. The pressure of the European deal triggered some unfortunate behavioral issues. She has become emotionally unstable and is lashing out with wild accusations to cover up her policy violations. I recommend we keep her isolated from the client to avoid further embarrassment. I will handle the narrative." I read it and felt a cold smirk touch my lips. He was pivoting. He realized the luxury spending lie might not hold up against the receipts, so he was moving to the hysterical woman defense. He was trying to paint me as crazy so that even if the numbers looked bad, the board would write it off as the ramblings of a disgruntled, unstable employee. But he was too late. The noise he referred to wasn't rumors, it was math. And math does not care about my emotional state. At 9:30, my phone rang again. It was Sasha from HR. The last time we spoke, she had been condescending, practically threatening me to sign the separation agreement. Now, her voice was tight, high-pitched, and trembling. "Ivy," she said. "Hi, the executive team. We would like to schedule a formal review call with you today at noon." "I thought I was terminated." "Sasha," I said. "Terminated employees do not do review calls. There has been a reassessment of the situation," she stammered. "Given the new documentation provided to the audit committee, we need to formally interview you as a witness. Your status is currently listed as suspended pending investigation, not terminated." They had walked it back. In less than 12 hours, I had gone from fired to suspended. It was a legal maneuver to keep me under their umbrella, but it was also a sign of panic. Sasha was no longer protecting Brent. She was trying to protect herself. She knew that if she was seen as aiding a fraudster, her own neck was on the block. "I will speak to you," I said. "But only with my attorney, Megan Price, present, and Sasha. Ensure the recording is turned on this time." I hung up. The pressure was building, but the killing blow came from outside the building. At 9:45, 15 minutes before the all-hands was set to begin, I received a forwarded email from Megan. She had been CC'd by the legal counsel of our European partner. The email was addressed directly to Robert Sterling, the CEO of SilverArc. "Dear Robert," it began, "we have received conflicting communications regarding the leadership of the integration project. Mr. Kincaid has informed us that he led the negotiations and that Ms. Harrison was removed for cause. However, our technical teams rely entirely on Ms. Harrison's architecture." I scanned down to the crucial paragraph. "We value integrity above all else. The sudden removal of the key architect, combined with the aggressive discount offered by Mr. Kincaid to sign immediately, has raised concerns about internal misrepresentation. We trust Ivy's work. Until her status is clarified and the ethical concerns regarding the contract handling are resolved, we are pausing all signature procedures." I imagined Robert Sterling reading that email, the CEO of a $500 million company being told by his biggest prospect that they trust the fired director more than the vice president. Brent had tried to steal the credit, but in doing so, he had exposed the company to a loss of trust that no discount could fix. Brent's reputation didn't just crack, it shattered. At 9:55, the dominoes began to speed up. My personal phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Ivy, it is David from the West Coast sales team. I heard what is happening. I do not want to get involved, but you should know you are not the first." I stared at the screen. David was a senior account executive. He was a good guy, quiet, always hit his numbers. "What do you mean?" I typed back. 2 years ago, David replied. "I had a massive commission check pending, $20,000. Brent froze it for 3 months, said there was a compliance review on my travel expenses. He held it over my head until I agreed to let him take lead credit on the Oracle account. Once I signed the account over to him, the money was released the next day. I never reported it. I needed the cash." My stomach turned. It was a pattern. Brent used the financial controls of the company as a personal extortion racket. He froze money to force compliance, to steal credit, to break people. I wasn't an isolated incident. I was just the first one who refused to bleed quietly. I took a screenshot of the text. I didn't reply to David. I didn't want to drag him into the line of fire. Instead, I forwarded the screenshot to Megan. "Send this to the audit committee," I told her. "Do not name David, redact his number. Just say, we have reason to believe this is a systemic pattern of extortion involving commission and reimbursement freezes. Request a historical review of all compliance holds authorized by Kincaid in the last 24 months. That was the key. If I accused him, it was hearsay. If I gave audit the map to find the bodies, it was an investigation." At 10 o'clock, I logged into the all-hands live stream using a link Jason had secretly sent me. The screen flickered to life. The stage was set. The lights were bright. The banner behind the podium read, "Q3 Growth and Integrity." Robert Sterling walked onto the stage. He looked tired. He adjusted the microphone. "Good morning," he said. "We have a packed agenda today. However, there has been a last-minute change to the schedule." I leaned in. "Brent Kincaid will not be presenting the European Partnership update today," the CEO said. His voice was flat. "We will be skipping that section to discuss operational compliance." The chat box on the side of the live stream, which was usually disabled, had been left open by mistake. It exploded. "Where is Brent? Skipping the biggest deal of the year. Compliance. What is going on?" I watched the screen. I saw the fear in the eyes of the other executives sitting in the front row. They weren't looking at the CEO. They were looking at their phones, reading the emails that were flying back and forth. Meanwhile, back in the digital depths of the company servers, the audit team was tearing Brent's life apart. Megan called me at 10:30. "They found the dinners," she said. "What dinners?" I asked. "Marcus Hale is angry," Megan said, and she sounded almost impressed. "He just sent over a preliminary disclosure to show good faith. They ran a keyword search on Brent's expense history. He has expensed over $40,000 in client development dinners at a steakhouse in downtown Chicago over the last year. He loves that steakhouse, I said. He goes every Tuesday. Exactly, Megan said. But here's the catch. He listed the attendees as client prospects. Audit just cross-referenced the names. Half of them are people who haven't worked at those companies for years. The other half, Ivy. He listed you as an attendee for 6 of them. I have never eaten dinner with him alone, I said. Ever. We know, Megan said. He was eating alone, or with friends, and billing it to the company by using employee names to justify the headcount. He was stealing from the company to feed himself, and he was using your name to cover the trail. It was pathetic. It was small, and it was devastating. The man who had frozen my $18,000 for luxury travel had been embezzling steak dinners for years. What happens now? I asked. Now, Megan said. We go to the meeting. The CEO just called me. He wants us in the boardroom at 2 o'clock. Not for an interview, for a resolution. I hung up the phone. I looked at the live stream, which was still playing on my laptop. The CEO was talking about values and transparency. I closed the laptop. I stood up and walked to my closet. I picked out my sharpest blazer, the one I wore when I closed deals. Brent Kincaid had tried to bury me. He had tried to erase me, but all he had done was dig a hole so deep that he couldn't climb out. I wasn't just going to get my money back. I was going to watch him lose everything. I checked my reflection in the mirror. I didn't look tired anymore. I looked like the person who was about to sign the final contract. I grabbed my bag. It was time to go to the office. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor of the Silver Arc building was usually a seamless, silent glide. Today, it felt like being pulled up into the chamber of a gun. I stood in the corner of the cab, watching the floor numbers climb. Next to me stood Megan Price, my attorney. She wore a suit that was sharper than anything I had ever seen in this building, a shade of charcoal gray that seemed to absorb the light. She did not look nervous. She looked like a predator entering a petting zoo. We were not here for a chat. We were here for a closed-session board review. The invitation had arrived an hour ago, sent directly from the executive assistant of Robert Sterling, the CEO. The subject line was simply Special Committee Assembly Mandatory Attendance. It included the General Counsel, the Chief Financial Officer, the head of HR, and 2 external members of the Board of Directors, and me. When the elevator doors slid open, the air on the executive floor was different. Usually, this floor hummed with the quiet confidence of power-hushed conversations, the soft click of expensive heels, the smell of fresh espresso. Today, it was silent, dead silent. The reception desk was empty. The glass conference rooms were empty. It was as if the building itself was holding its breath. We were ushered into a small holding room adjacent to the main boardroom. It was a glass box, exposed yet soundproof. I sat down at the round table, placing my hands flat on the cold surface. My phone buzzed. I looked down. A notification from DocuSign. Sender Brent Kincaid. Document name, confidential settlement, and release of claims. I frowned and tapped the screen to open the preview. Megan leaned over my shoulder, the scent of her peppermint tea drifting over me. I scrolled to the terms. In exchange for the immediate withdrawal of all complaints lodged with the Department of Labor and the Audit Committee, Silver Arc Solutions agrees to pay Ivy Harrison a lump sum of $8,000. $8,000. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, hot and acidic. It was not a laugh of humor. It was a laugh of disbelief. The debt he had stranded me with was $18,400. The damages to my reputation were incalculable, and here, in the 11th hour, he was offering me less than half of what he stole, wrapped in a legal gag order. He is insulting you, Megan said, her voice low and delighted. This is perfect. It is pathetic, I said. He thinks I am broke. He thinks I am so desperate for cash that I will take 40 cents on the dollar just to make the pain stop. No, Megan corrected me. He thinks he is smart. Look at the timestamp. He sent this 2 minutes ago. He is in the other room right now, probably under the table, trying to make this go away before the CEO walks in. He is trying to buy a witness, but he is cheap, and cheap criminals always get caught. She took my phone from my hand. Do not reply, she instructed. I will handle this. She typed a response on her own device, her thumbs moving with lethal precision. She did not address Brent. She replied to the General Counsel, attaching the screenshot of Brent's offer. Ms. Vance, she dictated as she typed. My client just received a settlement offer from Mr. Kincaid for $8,000 to drop her whistleblower complaint. We decline. Furthermore, we view this as a direct attempt to intimidate a witness and obstruct an active audit investigation. Preserve this communication for the board review starting in 10 minutes. She hit send. There, she said, placing her phone on the table. Now he has to explain to the general counsel why he is trying to settle a fraud case with pocket change. The door to our holding room opened. It wasn't the CEO. It was Marcus Hale, the CFO. He looked terrible. His tie was loosened, and he had dark circles under his eyes. He didn't look at me. He looked at Megan. We have a development, Marcus said. His voice was gravelly. It completed the forensic scrape of the shared drive logs 10 minutes ago. And, Megan asked, leaning back in her chair. We found the file transfer, Marcus said. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. I looked at the log. Timestamp Monday, 11:45 at night. User B. Kincaid admin. Action change owner. Transfer rights. Target folder, European Partnership Technical Final. Destination external email, B. Kincaid private Gmail. I felt the blood rush to my face. He moved the files before he fired me, I said. He transferred ownership of the entire intellectual property package to his private email account 3 hours before he locked me out. It gets worse, Marcus said, rubbing his face with his hand. He didn't just forward the files. He went into the document properties and scrubbed the author metadata. He tried to replace your name with his own, but the system creates a shadow backup every hour. We have the original, and we have his altered version. So it is not just theft, Megan said. It is corporate espionage. He was preparing to take the IP outside the secure environment. If the board sees this as simple retaliation, we can settle, Marcus said, looking at me for the first time. But if they see this as theft of trade secrets combined with wire fraud, this is a liability event. The insurance carriers will not cover us if we knowingly keep him employed. I looked at Marcus. I saw the fear in his eyes. He wasn't afraid of me anymore. He was afraid of what Brent had turned the company into, a criminal enterprise. Marcus, I said, did you know? No, he said quickly, too quickly. I knew he was aggressive with expenses. I knew he pushed the lines. But I did not know he was forging signatures, and I certainly did not know he was routing company IP to a personal Gmail account. You should have known, I said. You are the CFO. You let him freeze my money without an audit. He flinched. I am trying to fix it now. Ivy, you are not fixing it for me, I said cold. You are fixing it because you do not want to go to prison. He didn't argue. He turned and walked out of the room. 5 minutes later, my phone pinged again. It was an email from Sophia, the assistant to Elias, our European partner. Subject official statement regarding SilverArc contract. Dear Mr. Sterling, the email read. I had been blindly copied. Please be advised that our legal team has halted all review of the SilverArc proposal. We have been informed of significant internal compliance issues regarding the project leadership. We will only resume discussions if 2 conditions are met. 1. SilverArc provides a full, transparent audit of the project's authorship. 2. Ms. Harrison is reinstated as the signatory lead to verify the technical integrity of the deal. We will not sign a contract with a partner we cannot trust. Mr. Kincaid is no longer welcome to communicate with our firm. I let out a breath. That was the final nail. Brent wasn't just a fraud. He was now useless. He had promised the board a record-breaking deal, and instead, he had delivered a dead end. The client had explicitly banned him. The door to the main boardroom opened. A young assistant stepped out. She looked pale. Ms. Harrison, she said. The board is ready for you now. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my blazer. I remembered the moment in the hotel room in Porto. It felt like a lifetime ago, though it was only 4 days. I remembered the shaking hands, the nausea, the feeling of being small, insignificant, and easily crushed by the machinery of a massive corporation. I had felt like a ghost, fading away while my boss wrote over my history. Now, standing in the executive antechamber, I didn't feel small. I felt solid. I felt like concrete. I looked at Megan. She nodded once. Remember, she whispered, you do not need to be angry. You just need to be accurate. We walked toward the double doors. Inside, the room was vast. The table was mahogany, stretching 20 feet long. At the head of the table sat Robert Sterling, the CEO. To his right, the chairman of the board. To his left, Amanda Vance, the general counsel. and at the far end of the table, sitting alone, was Brent Kincaid. He looked smaller than I remembered. His suit was still expensive, but his posture was slumped. He was typing frantically on his phone, likely trying to recall the settlement offer he had sent me. He looked up as I entered. For a split second, our eyes locked. I expected to see anger. I expected to see the arrogance that had defined him for 5 years. But there was no arrogance left. There was only panic. He looked like a man who had realized, too late, that he wasn't the player. He was the piece. I took my seat opposite him. I placed my hands on the table. I placed the folder of evidence next to my phone. The room was silent. The air conditioning hummed. The city of Chicago sprawled out beneath us through the floor-to-ceiling windows, gray and indifferent. Robert Sterling cleared his throat. "This meeting is called to order," he said. "We are here to review the allegations of financial misconduct and wrongful termination regarding the employment of Ivy Harrison." He looked at me. "Ms. Harrison," he said. "Thank you for coming." "I am here to help," I said. My voice was steady. It didn't tremble. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding about who actually works for this company." Brent flinched. I opened my folder. I pulled out the first document, the metadata report of the forged signature. I slid it across the mahogany table toward the center. "Shall we begin with the 18th of this month?" I asked. At 1:17 in the morning. The silence that followed was heavy, like a stone dropping into deep water. But this time, the weight wasn't on my chest. It was on his. Robert Sterling did not raise his voice. That was the most terrifying thing about him. He sat at the head of the mahogany table, looking at the man who had been his vice president of sales for 6 years, and he did not yell. He simply placed a single sheet of paper on the table and smoothed it flat with his hand. "Brent," Robert said. The use of the first name sounded less like familiarity and more like a summons. "I want to ask you a very simple question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer, because the legal counsel is recording this session." Brent Kincaid shifted in his chair. He adjusted his cufflinks. He looked at the window, then at the floor, then finally at the CEO. "Of course, Robert," Brent said. His voice was a little too loud for the quiet room. "I am happy to provide context." "I do not want context," Robert said. "I want a yes or a no. Did you personally instruct the finance department to freeze $18,400 of Ivy's business expenses and initiate her termination at 2 o'clock in the morning, while she was asleep in Portugal?" Brent licked his lips. "It is not that simple. The system flagged the expenses. I was merely responding to an automated risk alert. You know how the algorithm is. It gets aggressive with international charges. I was trying to protect the firm's exposure." Robert looked at Marcus Hale, the CFO. Marcus didn't hesitate. He had been thrown under the bus by Brent in the hallway earlier, and now he was returning the favor. "That is a lie," Marcus said. His voice was flat, clinical. "There is no automation in our system that labels a venue deposit as suspected misuse. That is a manual tag. It requires a user to log in, override the default category, and type that specific phrase. The audit log shows that the tag was applied by your user ID at 3 in the afternoon on Monday." Brent's face flushed a patchy red. "Well, perhaps I was proactive. I had concerns about her stability. I was trying to stop the bleeding before it started." "Proactive," Megan Price said. She spoke for the first time, her voice cutting through the tension like a razor. She stood up and connected her laptop to the main projector. "Let us look at your definition of proactive." On the massive screen at the end of the room, a timeline appeared. It was the graphic I had built in my apartment the night before. It was simple, brutal, and impossible to argue with. At 1:17 in the morning, Megan narrated, pointing to the first hash mark. "You created a forged travel approval document using a pixelated copy of Ivy's signature. Metadata confirms this came from your laptop. At 2:00 in the morning," she continued, "you sent the termination email. At 2:06 in the morning," she pointed to the third mark, "you personally called the credit card issuer to report the card as lost or stolen, ensuring Ivy would be stranded at the hotel desk. And finally," Megan said, clicking to the next slide, "at 8:30 in the morning the previous day, you messaged the travel agency to remove her access because she was, quote, being let go tomorrow." Megan turned to face him. "You did not fire her because of the expenses. Mr. Kincaid, you created the expense issue to justify the firing you had already planned so you could steal the credit for the European deal." Brent slammed his hand on the table. "This is absurd. I am the vice president of sales. I have brought in $50 million to this company. You are going to take the word of a disgruntled employee and her ambulance chaser lawyer over mine. I was managing a crisis. Ivy was unstable. She was erratic. Was she? Robert Sterling asked. Because the client seems to think she is the only stable thing about this project. Robert tapped his keyboard. The screen changed. It was no longer the timeline. It was the email Brent had sent me the night before, the one from his personal Gmail account. The font was large. The words were undeniable. If you stay silent, I will consider getting the money released. I can probably get them to classify it as severance. The room went completely silent. You could hear the hum of the hard drives in the server rack down the hall. You offered to use company funds to bribe a witness to cover up your own fraud, Robert said. He sounded disappointed. And you suggested classifying it as severance to defraud the IRS. Brent opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Amanda Vance, the general counsel, begging for a lifeline. Amanda didn't look at him. She was busy writing on a notepad. She tore the sheet off and slid it to Robert. Robert read it, nodded, and looked back at Brent. Brent Kincaid, Robert said. Effective immediately. Your employment with Silver Arc Solutions is terminated for cause. The grounds are gross misconduct, falsification of company records, retaliation against a whistleblower, and attempted wire fraud. You cannot do this, Brent whispered. I have equity. I have a contract. Your contract has a clawback clause for criminal misconduct, Amanda Vance said, finally speaking. We are exercising it. You are leaving with nothing, and frankly, you should be grateful we are not handing this file directly to the district attorney right now, though the audit is still ongoing, so that option remains on the table. Security is waiting outside, Robert said. Please leave your badge and your phone on the table. Brent stood up. He looked at me. I think he wanted to say something. I think he wanted to scream, to blame me, to tell me I was ungrateful. But he looked at the evidence on the screen, and he looked at the faces of the board members who were staring at him with pure disgust. He realized, finally, that he wasn't the protagonist of this story. He was just the villain who got caught. He placed his phone on the mahogany table with a soft clatter. He unclipped his badge and dropped it next to the phone. He walked to the door, his footsteps heavy on the plush carpet. The door opened, and 2 security guards stepped in to escort him out. He didn't look back. When the door clicked shut, the energy in the room shifted instantly. The tension evaporated, replaced by the frantic need for damage control. Robert Sterling turned to me. The tired look was gone, replaced by the sharp focus of a CEO who needed to save a deal. Ivy, he said, I would like to apologize, on behalf of the board, and personally. We failed to detect a toxic element in our leadership, and you paid the price for it. Thank you, Robert, I said. But apologies do not pay my American Express bill. No, they do not, Robert agreed. Amanda has already prepared a settlement agreement. We are unfreezing the $18,400 immediately. We are also issuing a check for your full legal fees, plus the bonus you would have received for the European deal. And my employment, I asked. We want you back, Robert said. The client wants you back. We cannot close this deal without you. We are prepared to offer you the vice president title, effective immediately. I looked at Megan. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. I appreciate the offer, Robert, I said. I will finish the European deal. I will make sure the client signs, and I will make sure the integration is flawless. I will not let the company fail, but after the deal is closed, I am resigning. Robert looked surprised. Why you won? Because, I said, standing up. I realized something in Porto. I do not want to work for a company where I have to hire a lawyer to prove I'm doing my job. I will consult for you. I will save this contract. But my price is double my previous salary, and I work on my own terms. Robert paused. He looked at the empty chair where Brent used to sit. He looked at the chaos that would ensue if I walked out the door right now. Agreed, he said. We walked out of the boardroom 10 minutes later. The fallout was swift and brutal. Exactly as it should be. By 5 o'clock that evening, the company directory had been updated. Brent Kincaid was gone. Sasha Vale, the HR partner who had tried to gaslight me, was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into her complicity. She was escorted out of the building an hour after the meeting, and Lena, my brave, terrified travel coordinator, who had risked her job to send me the evidence, I made sure her name was the first one I mentioned in my transition report. She was promoted to operations manager 2 weeks later, with a direct reporting line to the CFO. ensuring no sales executive could ever bully her again. I walked out of the Silver Arc building and into the Chicago evening. The rain had stopped. The air smelled like wet pavement and ozone. I pulled out my phone. I had one last email to send. It was to the client in Europe. Dear Elias, the internal matters have been resolved. The leadership structure has been corrected. I am ready to proceed with the signature. I put the phone in my pocket. People think revenge is about noise. They think it is about making a scene, screaming at the top of your lungs, or flipping a table, but it isn't. Revenge is quiet. Revenge is a screenshot saved at 2 a.m. Revenge is a metadata log hidden in a PDF. Revenge is refusing to take the settlement, refusing to be gaslighted, and refusing to disappear. Brent Kincaid tried to erase me. He tried to turn me into a cautionary tale about a woman who couldn't handle the pressure. Instead, he turned me into the person who ended his career. I hailed a taxi. I didn't look back at the skyscraper. I had a deal to close. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't doing it for a boss. I was doing it for myself. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment down below and let me know your city or country. If you enjoyed seeing justice served cold, please make sure to subscribe to Boss Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people who need to hear it. See you in the next one.